Very good afternoon to everybody. Welcome to the G-QRP and the Telford Hamfest. This is our 12th visit to this beautiful part of Shropshire. It's in Colesbrookdale and the Ingenuity Centre. For those who don't know, there's 30% off the entrance fee if you want to go into the Ingenuity Centre to have a look around. It's really worth the visit. This afternoon we've got 3 talkers for you. The first one is Dave Pitt. And that's 53YXL. I have to look at it just in case I miss it there. Sorry about it. It's 53YXL. And Dave's going to talk to you on 21 years of a potted history of UK low frequency operation. If you're interested, so I'll give you Dave Pitt. Thank you very much. Can everybody hear? Okay.
Well, can you hear me? Because I'm
I was going to stand. Is that all right? Okay, then.
Are you receiving me? Good.
Okay, thank you, Dave.
Okay, well, I thought we'd update everybody on LF, amateur LF. Obviously, LF was the first thing radio that was done. But we've reinvented the wheel and gone back to it. And some countries have been doing it longer than we have. In Australia and New Zealand, they used what we call the long-wave broadcast band as an amateur band. And in America, it's been possible to get Part 15 experimental. Well, it's not. You don't have to get a license. You just do it. It's an allocation for experimenting done on LF, but only with very, very low power. So we'll just say 21 years in the UK, because others have been doing it a little bit longer. And on different parts of LF. So it all started for us in 1996 when we were able to get a notice of variation to run on what we call the 73 kilohertz band. 73 is an amateur expression, so that's what we called it. And we were waiting for an international allocation on 136 kilohertz, which was supposed to be in the pipeline. But in an expression of quite unusual generosity, the authorities gave us a stopgap allocation down on 73 kilohertz to be going on with. So we got NOVs, and we worked that out. The wavelength is about 2.6 miles. So you're not going to get like a half-wave dipole or anything. So obviously people put their thinking caps on and came up with stuff like this. A wire loop, tube with a big capacitor, try and get some current going around the loop. And you'll notice at the bottom there, it's tapped and it says 4 ohm feed point. And the reason for that was that people discovered that a few high power audio amplifiers would generate a reasonable amount of power on 73 kilohertz. Some of them have got a bandwidth of about 100. So they would produce some RF on 73 kilohertz. So people got on fairly quickly with setups like that. And the other approach was, of course, to put up a high capacitance T antenna, like you see, a miniature version of what's at Droitwich, just as many top wires as you can get on to increase the capacity, and a great big whacking loading coil at the bottom. That was the key to it all. In any of my LF columns, there will generally be a picture of a whacking great loading coil. This is where it started, 73 kilohertz. You needed about 20 millihenries to resonate the aerial. That's a heck of a big inductor. And the bit on the top is a variometer, one coil turning inside another to change the resonant point of the system. You didn't use capacitors because with any amount of power you'd have 20 kilowatts or something on the aerial. So capacitors were a no-no unless you had some very expensive vacuum variables. All sorts of things were tried. Here's a crap thing wound on a piece of plastic fencing, coiled up, fine until it rained. And on receive, we'd use things like this, frame aerials, just to null out the noise, peak up the signal. So that's the sort of technology we had when we started in 1996. So by the end of the year, people had managed to get a signal out of their back gardens. That was at the end we was taking. You'll never get a signal out of your back garden on natural frequency. So 25 to 30 kilometres those early experiments got. Not exactly earth shaking. So into 1997, and there's a breakthrough. These come thick and fast. You saw that Marconi aerial. That was the sort of thing that only G4JMT had put up. And with a nice big coil optimised for minimum loss, he managed to get received 100 kilometres away on CW. So I thought, well, that's a distance, that is. You'd be happy with that on top band railway, 100 kilometres. So, okay, this is going to work. But then, later in the year, the big breakthrough. You know, if you're a CW operator, that as you narrow the bandwidth on your receiver, you are able to copy weaker and weaker signals, but the filter starts ringing, it's impossible to copy fast CW in a very narrow filter. But it does mean you can copy weaker signals. So Peter, G3PLX, took the concept to the limit, and he, using a DSP experimental board, processor board, wrote some FFT, fast Fourier transform software for that, to make a filter with a bandwidth of about 0.025 Hertz. So 25 millihertz bandwidth. Now, of course, at that bandwidth, you can't send normal CW, so Andy, G4JMT, sent very, very slow CW, generated with something he built, about 100 seconds for each dot of the Morse. So that is very, very slow. And it was received in Cumbria. There, you can read the Morse off the screen. That says G4. JNT. So we've got something going here, and that was a distance of nearly 400 kilometres. And that set the tone for the next few years. You think, wow, if we can do this sort of thing, then the sky's the limit. How far can we actually go? So by the end of 1997, 393 kilometres, that's from Andy or JNT up to Peter PLX in Kenji, Cumbria, using what we'll call a slow mode, less than CW kind of speeds. So is DSP the way to do it? Probably it is. So we go to 1998, and the good news is we get finally the 136 kilohertz band. So all activity moves to 136, or most of it does. It's easier to get out. Aerials are more efficient. They're relatively bigger. It's about twice the frequency almost. We only need about 3 millihenry loading coils, so that's manageable, this sort of size. But we can't use those audio amplifiers anymore. They won't produce much in the way of power on that frequency. So a lot of other European countries come on as well, onto 136, except for France. They always seem to have an amazing bureaucracy that takes a very long time to get anything decided. So they're not on yet, but the rest of Europe is. We get it by notice of variation, so you have to apply, but it's easy to do. Later in the year, you know the FFT is coming, the fast Fourier transform for the DSP processing. But now, some clever chaps wrote software to run on your PC. And this meant that the average amateur who hasn't got a DSP processor board and isn't good at writing software can just run this on his PC, plug the receiver into the sound card, and you've got a program like this. Now, I've looked at this slide, and I can't really work out who's on there. It says something like, something OM. No, anyway, a bad choice of slide. But anyway, that is the first, I chose it because it's the early spectrogram program, and it runs the trace scrolls from right to left, which writes the Morse from left to right. So you read it off the screen, and you just run that on your PC, and all's well.
So everyone can join in. ON7YD wrote a little utility to send very slow Morse using your PC's COM port. That was called QRS. You can still download that. So we'd got the tools to do the job. We got the sending program, receiving program, and G3LNP, Tony Preedy, looked at these NOV and said, well, I'm entitled to run 1 watt ERP. How much power will I need into my top band dipole with the feeders strapped to generate 1 watt ERP? Quite a lot. So he pressed into service an old linear amplifier and he generated enough power to produce 1 watt ERP. And that was a revelation because we'd been sort of sticking our ears in the speaker trying to hear little weak and watery signals. And when Tony came on, he was 5 and 9 all over the country. So that was another wake-up call. If you're going to do any good on LF, sorry, this is a QRP do, isn't it? If you're going to do any good on LF, you need quite a bit of power. The ERP is only still a watt, but the actual RF heading for the tuner is probably a kilowatt. Of course, that does have slight issues. This is my aerial tuning hut after a slight issue occurred, and all those coils of SAD wire used to be my loading coils. So it did point out the fact that you have to use professional standards of insulation, and you know, when you're dealing with this kind, you've probably got 20 kilovolts on the antenna. So what further on in the year, a lot happened in '98 because we just got 136. We worked from G, we worked into Italy, Belgium, Holland, Finland, Switzerland. Lots of stuff. There's IK1 ODO, a nice clean trace there on the screen. I must have captured that one. So by the end of 1998, things had come on a bit. We'd worked 2,000 kilometres between GW4ALJ and OH1TN, and that was probably on CW. I remember working OH1TN on CW. And 393 kilometres, that still stands on 73 because everybody else went off onto 136 at that point. So into 99, and we thought, well, this is going so well, can we get across the pond? So a load of American amateurs went out to a beach somewhere on the east coast of the States. It was January when they did this, so it was freezing cold, blowing a gale. They were flying kites, messing about on the beach, getting frostbite. And they didn't hear a thing. Everybody in Europe was kicking up a big stink, but no signals were received across. So that rather put a damper on things, so that maybe we can't get across the Atlantic on LF, but it was a good try. Germany comes on. For some reason, I don't know what it is about the German education system, but you get a lot of keen German amateurs experimenting. A lot younger than we tend to be in this country. So you get a lot of good input from the Germans on any experimental subject. I'm sure it's the same in microwaves and things. So they were a breath of fresh air, bringing lots of new ideas. We got the limit, or the range on 73 kilohertz went up to about 700 odd kilometres. When Peter, G3LDO, used to do the aerials column in the Radcom, he worked Tony, who was HP9ASB, crossband. There were a lot of crossbands to 73 kilohertz going on now. And many contacts, lots of Germans on, and LX1PD in Luxembourg, obviously, with a big SIG. So it was an exciting time. The Ropex transmitter came out. If you wanted to buy a transmitter because you couldn't be bothered to build one, this thing came out, but it only ran 100 watts, which we've just seen is probably not enough. And it was crystal controlled on one frequency, 137.3 I think it was. And so if one person was on using one, you've got to work them or nobody because you were all stuck on the same frequency. And they'd soldered the crystal in right around the back of somewhere. Very difficult to get at. So a missed opportunity. Right, so the end of 1999, we got over 2,000 kilometres on 136 between I5, MXX and OH1TN in Finland. So that's sort of down in Italy to up in Finland. And the only real reason that was the limit was that there were the two stations who were furthest apart who were on the band. So we were sure we could get further. As you saw, we'd raised the limit on 73k to 700 odd kilometres. So into the new millennium, and the record on 73 kilohertz is improved with a crossband QSO. Between myself and OH1TN. Ooh, thank you. So that is 3YXM received in Finland. So we were still messing, having learned a few things about how to do it on 136. We went back to 73, a few of us, and messed about down there. Eastern Europe started to come on 136, weird call signs like S57 and whatever. The Oscar kilos came on. So more and more was happening. The 73 kilohertz NOVs were extended to last until the end of 2001. So we thought they were going to run out, but they extended them. CT1DRP in Portugal, he got a permit to come on, so most of Europe was now on 136. And then eventually France came on as well, so good old France, they're there. And in September, we crossed the pond. David, G0MRF, he got permission to operate from an old block of flats in Feltham, London, that was about to be demolished. So he went up the top of it, strung out big long lengths of wire, made almost a dipole, and with some gubbins there. That is an old Decca transmitter from the Decca high-fix beacon network that used to operate between sort of 80 and 140 kilohertz. Macking gate loading coil, of course. And he made it across the pond to VE1ZJ in Nova Scotia, right as close as you can get, really, with a 14 meg crossband contact. So that was the first crossing of the Atlantic, closely followed by G3LDO and OK1FIG got across the Atlantic as well. So he's a good bit further east. So that extended the range. The NOVs were issued again until June 2003 now, so they kept extending them. And VE1ZZ got permission to come on the band with a special permit, and he was received in G. So we've had both ways across the Atlantic in the year 2000. And V1ZZ actually received CW from MM0ALM, who was near Aberdeen. So there was the prospect that we could make a two-way CW contact on 136, but that never quite happened. Something to aim for, maybe. So by the end of that year, 136 had got up to about 5,300 kilometres and 73 to 1,600. So what's the limit? You know, we're across the Atlantic. How much further can we go? Into 2001, and we extend the limit a bit. W4DEX. A few of the Americans were getting special permits to come on and use the band, which was very good from our point of view, because they had tended to have massive real estate ranches with huge masts and things, so they could put out good signals. And W4DEX received M0BMU, and VE3LK was received over here, so lots of transatlantic traffic. Also Trans-Pacific, VE7SL, who's up in the northwest of Canada, receives ZL6QH in New Zealand. But that was on 171 kilohertz. They hadn't yet got the international 136K band, which was being rolled out across the world. but they were still on 171 kilohertz, so it wasn't really, it was an amateur band in their terms. It was an amateur contact, or an amateur reception. And that's about the limit, isn't it? 11,709 kilometres, that's a pretty good distance. So in 2001, out comes Argo. Now Argo is a specially written FFT PC program that you can still download today. It's still developed by I2PhD, and this is a very busy screen of stuff that he's managed to see. And there, of course, all these what we might call visual modes. There's a slow CW, and down here you'll notice a little bit of Hellschreiber, which some of the sending programs would allow you to send, so you could write pictures on people's Spectrum displays. So all those sort of things were being tried. And this is freeware, works very well, works on any PC. So you can still download Argo from weaksignals.com today and give it a try. G3AQC, sadly missed, Laurie, was plugging away still on 73 kilohertz, and it was received by W1TAG. You'll see there he's using a variation of QRS which differentiates the dots from the dashes by frequency instead of by length. Because if you're sending a dot at 10 seconds long, say, your dashes have got to be, well, quite often we curtail them to 20 seconds, but they should be 30 seconds long, which takes a long time to send. So this DFCW mode, you took the minimum element length that was getting through, say 10 seconds, whatever it was, and you made all the elements the same length, so dit would be 2 dars on the higher frequency and a dit on the lower frequency. Di-di-di-da-da, di-da, da-da, di-da, da-di-da-di. So it was a way of sending the CW slow, but not quite as slow as with QRS. So that's W1 tag receiving G3AQC. We also got VE1ZJ receiving ZL6QH. Later in the year, they finally got onto 136. So I can't actually make that out. I can't remember what he sent. I think he was just sending Q. But anyway, that's what he got. So it's definitely them. So by the end of 2001, 136 had reached 15,000 kilometres and 73, 5 and a bit thousand kilometres. Not bad, really, for something that people were saying a few years before, can we get out of our back gardens? So into 2002, remember everybody else is on 136, even France, but the FCC in the States are still dithering about whether to allocate 136 because they're worried about power lines that use that sort of frequency for signalling, controlling switches and whatever. More transatlantic success on 73K, G3LDO and G3AQC are regularly received across the Atlantic. And new modes like JSON come out. So by the end of 2002, we're still roughly where we were, but you know, more developments, more people coming on. 2003, we're speeding up now. 2003, we've still got 73K. It's a bit awkward to use because Rugby Radio had a transmitter on 73.3 kilohertz, bang in the middle of the band, sending data, and it had sidebands and it blotted the band out. So we tended to come on the first Tuesday of the month when it was down for maintenance. But then that all came to an end on June the 30th, 2003. But remember, we got that in 1996, so it had it for 7 years almost. So that was quite a good innings on 73K, and we'd done all we probably could do. And I guess nowadays, with the way things are, you could probably, if you wanted to do something on there, you could probably get an NOV to have a play. We had a station come on from Asiatic Russia, UA9OC. He was received in New Zealand. Of course, it's shorter from there, but still 13,870 kilometres. And lots of transatlantic stuff carried on. This is a typical transatlantic contact. M0BMU being received in VO1. So that says M0, the B's a bit scrabbled up, MU. And then that says BMU from NA. That's, we used to shorten the calls. It's like meteor scatter or whatever, but you shorten the calls so that you get the vital information across. So that's a typical two-way using QRS over a long and scrubby path. In 2004, the ZL and the UA0 had a contact. So that's the longest two-way contact ever at this point, 10,000 kilometres-ish. And rumours started to circulate that we would get a 500k allocation. The emergency services shipping stopped using 500k around then, and we were thinking, oh, well, nobody else is using it, we'll have a go. So the RSGB put a proposal into Ofcom for 10 watts ERP on there. But then, that's good news, but we got bad news. Rugby, you know where Rugby Radio was, is to broadcast Loran on 100 kilohertz. So that's right in the middle of the country, not very good. So that was something to look forward to. More new modes. Wolf came out by KK7KA. It's still around, but didn't really catch on. G3AQC managed to get his 136 kilohertz signal detected by ZL4OL. I say detected, he couldn't really read it, but it was definitely the signal, and that's 19,000 kilometres. But bad news, the Rugby Loran starts up, and you saw those spectrograms I was showing earlier. It changed those from a nice clean background to that sort of effect with lots of lines all over it. And the, I don't know whether the sound will come out if I try it, but Loran sounded, where's my mouse? Anybody see the mouse? No, I can't make that work. It's probably, hello? No, we've got a sound clip of Loran, but you don't want to hear that anyway, it's awful. It just goes clackety, clackety, clackety. You can still hear it now, it's still on 100 kilohertz. And it's a pulsed system, so it sends sidebands out either side a long way. So that was a pain in the arse in the Midlands because it meant you had to use a loop aerial to receive because you had to null out Rugby, so it wasn't necessarily optimum for whatever you were trying to receive. Into 2006, Asiatic tests, ZL tests. Some guys went out to Asiatic Russia and put up a big station. We've still got the rumours about 500k. What are we going to get? Some German amateurs get on 440 kilohertz with a special permit. SM6BHZ gets a special permit to run 20 watts on 505 kilohertz. The US issues a bit of spectrum around 505 as well. So it's bits all over the place. Oh, good news year 2007. We get a 500k by NOV. We can run 100 milliwatts ERP from 501 to 504 kilohertz. So it's something anyway. And maybe not quite sticking to that 100 milliwatts limit. GI4 DPE works WE2XGR, which is a funny American experimental call. 4,800 kilometres. Finbar's up in the northwest corner of Ireland. It was an ex-Malin Head radio op, so we knew a bit about working stuff on 500 kilohertz. And Rugby Radio goes off. So no more Loran. The Loran from Rugby was a temporary thing whilst they readied Anthorn in Cumbria to take over that duty. So Loran is now rattling away from Anthorn, so it's gone quiet in the Midlands and it's now noisy up in southwest Scotland, where I go for a nice quiet location. But anyway, swings and roundabouts, the greater good. So into 2008, and the NOVs are upped to 1 watt. we can run 1 watt ERP now, which is a bit more like it. And they're to last until the end of February 09. Canada come on 500k. GI4DPE works WE2 XGR/6 with him on SSB on 472, or it wasn't 472 at the time, it was 500k. And the Whisper mode comes out. Now Whisper played a big part in LF stuff and MF. Lots of people use Whisper on there. You look at the Whisper map for 600 meters or whatever they call it on there, MF I think they call it, and you'll see a lot of spots. So it was a big thing, enabled people to see where they're getting. 2009 we got even more 500 kilohertz, 10 watts ERP. They kept upping our limit. Still on the temporary allocation with an NOV. Extended to the end of 2012. Norway gets full access to 493 to 510, so there's a bit of overlap there. And contacts carry on 136. Weirdly, this, because Japan had just got on 136 kilohertz, this came out, which looks quite nice. It's a 136 kilohertz transmitter that you can go and buy. Waters and Stanton had it. Unfortunately, it cost 600 quid. It only ran 100 watts, but at least it was tunable with a DDS in it. So quite a nice thing, but 600 quid, ridiculous, and only 100 watts. So you'd need an amplifier on the end of it on 136. Never mind. Into 2010, 500 kilohertz is the Iceland come on. The ZLs get it. So lots of people have all these different allocations, and it's all working towards getting a homologated, if you like, a worldwide allocation. And we're still negotiating for that at this time. And nobody's quite certain where it's going to be. So various countries have stuck in different bits. And the Dreamers band experiments begin. People thought there's a bit of deregulated spectrum, certainly in Germany where all these keen experimenters live. Below 9 kilohertz, there's no regulations. You can do what you like. In this country, somebody foolishly asked the question of Ofcom, can we operate below 9 kilohertz? And Ofcom said, oh, no, we own the whole spectrum. See that battery there, generating DC, we own that as well. So, having asked the question, we then couldn't just come on and do it. But I'm sure, as again, you could get an NOV if you wanted one. DK7FC went out and flew a kite on 8.97 kilohertz, just below the 9 kilohertz limit. And he was received over in Ireland, 1,300 kilometres away on 8 kilohertz, well, 9 kilohertz. So, blimey. That was a fair, because with all the knowledge we'd got from working up through 73k and whatnot, we were able to go in there hard and use all the techniques we'd learned and immediately get a good result. So, quite amazing what you can do. 2011, more Malta comes on 500 kilohertz. So another country joins the throng. I can't remember what their allocation exactly was, but another temporary one. And the Dreamers band carries on with more experiments, more people join in, mainly in Germany, because, as I say, they don't have to bother with any permits or anything, and just come on. 2012, Opera comes out. Well, anybody's heard of the Ross mode, but the guy who developed that, a Spanish chap, he made this Opera mode, which is, if you look at it on a spectrum display, it's just an on-off carrier. No frequency shift or anything, just on-off carrier in different, it looks like it's QRS, but it isn't. It doesn't make any sense as Morse. And it was quite effective, but it uses an internet backhaul. So when you fire up your Opera, you tell the internet you're on, and other stations automatically listen for you. And there's always a worry that maybe it's not all RF. The German experiments continue. DK7FC is received in Australia on 136 kilohertz, and his experiments on the Dreamers band reach to Todmorden. There's a very keen listener up there, Paul Nicholson, who's got some fantastic receiving apparatus and a lot of skill, was able to receive these test transmissions from Germany on 8 kilohertz. And transatlantic on 500k again, well, any ship's operator will tell you that that works. 2013, we get the 472 kilohertz band at last, hooray! Oh, except in France, of course, where the bureaucratic system grinds even slower than ours. And again, like happened with 73k, a lot of people move up to 472 and forget about 136. So the activity drops down there. 2014, France finally come on. Most countries are now on, all over the world. So we've all had to retune our systems from 500 and wherever it was down to 472. Quite a lot more turns on the loading coil, you find. And then, this didn't take long, transatlantic on VLF. First on 29.499 kilohertz, so he's just under the 30 kilohertz-ish. So he's VLF from W2ZM. And then on 8971 hertz, you can hear that, 8.9 kilohertz from W4DEX, received by Paul Nicholson in Todmorden. Amazing. Right across the Atlantic. So it just shows these low frequencies, once you launch them, they just keep on going. 2015, out comes EBNaught. The tests on the VLF frequencies up to now had just been looking for carriers. Is that your carrier? Yeah, I think that's your carrier. Move it. Oh, it is your carrier. So it wasn't a message as such, just an identification, but this was a mode designed to be used at that sub-noise level that would still be receivable or could carry information at this amazingly low level within a dB or so of the theoretical limit. It's best suited to VLF. It requires extreme stability, both transmit and receiver, so you can overlay samples again and again and they'll all be phase coherent. It's a BPSK mode, and that's what's driving these Dreamers experiments on VLF. Yes, just shift the phase. Yes?
Do you get any interference from ADSL or ADSL2?
No, it's below that. Well, 472 does tend to suffer. And I think there is, on the old ADSL rather than VDSL, I think there is something down around 100, but I've never had that problem. 472 is a little more prone to it. It's more like top band in the way it picks up noise. Yes?
How small would a realistic antenna be for use on, say, 136 or 472? How small can you go?
On 472, I'd say if you've got an 80-metre dipole kind of size aerial, strap the feeders, tune it up, you'd probably do all right. On 136, I'd reckon you've got to have something that you would say is going to be quite a good top band aerial before it's really worth making a big effort. The trouble is, if it's too small, I mean, you can pump lots of power in, and as I've said, and get the ERP, but it'll all catch fire. It'll be so hard. It'll have so many volts on it if it's too small that it'll be a hard work. You can't do it. Peter.
Do the Dreamers have any problem with the submarine communication from Amthor or vice versa?
No, I think that's up on 20 odd kilohertz now. Rugby used to be on 16, and when it went to no, it's not Anthorn, is it? Skelton, the massive thing they built. That's on about 22 or around there. I think there's a couple of them. But no, there is something they get trouble with, and that is the lightning detectors for these websites like lightningmaps.org, where you can look where the lightning storms are. Very useful. Those detectors operate somewhere around 8.5 kilohertz, so they have to avoid those frequencies, or the local lightning detectors will all be upset. But that's about the only thing. And of course, if you're keying or sending a carrier on 8 kilohertz, everything tends to sing, and the neighbours are going, "What's that playing?" It's like it'd be like in Cuba, where they reckon they've been deafening the American diplomats by some sonic warfare or something. So it'd be like that, wouldn't it?
Right.
I think that's it.
Well, thank you, Dave. That was very interesting.
Good. Thank you.